Welcome to Canada Files. I'm Valerie Pringle. My guest today is Douglas Coupland, writer, designer, and visual artist. His first novel was Generation X, and he has since written 21 more works of fiction and nonfiction. He has created innumerable works of art exhibited around the world. He has invented slogans and words. Coupland is incredibly prolific and has been called a cultural guru, the heir apparent to Marshall McLuhan. Oh, and he's written a book about him too. Hello, Douglas.
Hello, Valerie.
How is it possible, as your friend wrote about you, that you actually think that you are underproductive?
Oh boy, my father, he was an action hero. He put his way through medical school testing fighter jets for the Air Force. And then when he went civilian, we go up the coast in a beaver and a float plane, and he did all these things. And because he did so many things, I have no excuse to not do things too. And I mean, life on Earth is so transient and so fast. I mean, why not do what you can while you still can do it? People talk about retiring, like, why would you, you're gonna go out and live on a boat or something? I mean, you wake up, your brain's still active, you can have ideas still. And not every idea you do is gonna work. Like 1 out of 10 is like fantastic. 2 are gonna be really great. Sometimes you get the flaming mess first. And so you're psyched out and you don't do things. But you just happen to get the flaming mess first. Do another thing and you might get the 10 out of 10, so.
How do you spend your time? Do you have a sense of time running out?
Great question. 3 years ago, for various reasons, I realized that there was no actual evidence of my brain via muscles, bones, brush, tip, paint on a surface. There's no real record of that. And so I decided that I was going to paint, and I was going to become a painter. And I was doing this at 59 or 60. So I had to invent a style and figure out what I am gesturally.
And what prompted this?
So what happens when you lose someone very important in your life very quickly is that you wait 12, 14 months and you are going to change. You don't know how you're going to change, but you will change, and there's nothing you can do about it. And so you just watch what happens around the 1 year mark. And that's what caused me to become a painter. And I don't want to travel.
Who did you lose?
Oh, it was my mother. We were very close. And, but my days are now, I don't want to jinx them, but they're wonderful. I wake up, I stop traveling. I have someone who does all the boring stuff in life, and I live in the studio. And it's a wonderful existence, which I started doing it 20 years before. But every painting is an experiment. If you know what it's going to look like when you start it, then you shouldn't be doing it. Then you learn from mistakes, and you create something that I would hope is beautiful.
So in your 60s now, this is something new. I mean, you've been an artist your whole life.
Okay, the other thing, and it may just be a coincidence, but, and I'm not in any way political about this, but after my first COVID shot, I've never been able to write a word. I can't write anymore. And I've tried, and I can barely write an email. And that, I don't know if it's cause and effect, but I cannot write anymore.
So now you have to paint.
Oh, I'm glad that didn't get wrecked, so, okay.
You were born in West Germany. Your dad was on the base there. Grew up in Vancouver, but it was pretty conventional 60s childhood that you had.
Well, I mean, if you were growing up in Canada in the latter half of the 20th century, you won the geographical, medical, cultural lottery prize of all time. I cannot think of a better place to have lived and grown up in what period in history as 1961 up to 2000.
And then, but you went to art school. You said those were the best years of your life. So what spoke to you? What did you think you were going to do? Who did you think you were going to become?
Well, I think it was F. Scott Fitzgerald who said, you don't go to school to learn information, you go there to learn your style. This was 1980, 84, a million years ago, and okay, everyone slept with everyone. You could say anything and everyone's like, yawn. There was punk, post-punk, blitz, a new wave. Everyone's like, who are you? And this is who I am. And it was this incredible freedom. And in third year art school, which I now model my life after, I had the woodworking studio. I did the school paper, was on the school student society. And it worked, and it still works, I think.
You wrote Generation X, Gen X, when you were 30. You know, and it was partly you said, I'm not a baby boomer. You didn't want to be identified as a baby boomer. Tell me that story.
Growing up, I was always taught, oh, you must have been really sad about the JFK assassination. And like, no, I have no memory of it. How could I? And like,
you were two.
Well, everyone was telling me I had these memories that I simply didn't have. And there's that expression like the kids now use, like, hey boomer. Like, I was the first one to say, hey boomer. And I had to invent my way out of it because I just didn't like being told I was something I wasn't. And hence Gen X. And when I wrote it, I honestly didn't think there were going to be 11 people I went to high school with who would get it. And it worked out.
But what nerve did it hit, do you think?
Marshall McLuhan, who I've thought about a lot and I've written about him, he had this expression that the oversimplification of anything is always exciting. And I think created this really amazing oversimplification of like hundreds of millions of billions of people, but there you go. I'm still amazed that it worked, so to speak.
Well, then it spawned. I mean, there's Gen X, and then there's Gen Y and Gen Z. You did a book, Gen A, but you know, it really, you know, sort of captures people's idea of how we delineate young people,
Yeah.
which you say is often very negative. Oh, they're lazy. They don't want to work.
Well, with Generation X is like early not, you're slackers. They don't want to work. They don't want to do anything. And of course, now we're running the planet. Yay. But then, well, in China, they went from an agrarian rural society to high tech, like overnight. And you had, instead of having generations there, they say born in the 80s, born in the 90s, born in the 2000s. And their brains are so different because of the technologies they use to mold them that they literally cannot communicate with each other. And I think a version of that's what's happening right now in North American culture, for sure. You know, people barely read books anymore. People, they want it fast, they want it now, any down moment. I love it, Instagram, like, oh, it's a dog rescue, I feel good.
Well, you lived for a while in Palo Alto. You were writing for Wired. You were there sort of for like the birth of the internet. Tell me about those days.
It was so much fun. Oh my God, it was fun.
What did you think was going to happen with this? It was all going to be great.
I was lucky to work with some really great minds through Wired. And the internet hadn't turned evil yet. I'm surprised it took so long to do so. Information wants to be free. No, it wants to be archived and strip mined for data. And but we knew that it was a really great historical moment that doesn't come along that often. And then you also had the music scene, which was exploding then with the grunge and with the grunge. It sounds like your grandparents. It was a wonderful time. Again, to be alive in North America in the latter half of the 20th century, bonanza.
When you did a book about Marshall McLuhan, but you know, so interesting that he foresaw the internet, that he foresaw the bad stuff.
I know that the McLuhan family gets really angry if you say that he predicted something or that he was a seer. I don't know quite why, because he saw everything. He got shopping and commerce, right? The interface was a bit clunky. The fact that he was able to have these ideas and perceptions not based in futurology, but instead looking back to like Norse sagas and early 20th century poets, and it worked. And probably one of the most interesting mysteries of all time.
Is how McLuhan's brain figured this stuff out and saw it.
Yeah. I wish I could go back and redo that book. I can't write anymore. So instead, zeroing on the things that he got right. And that would make, what would make a good book? It'd be a good website because, you know, who wants a book?
But what were then what would you focus on?
Oh, the way the internet erodes democracy and the political process, the way that it facilitates lies of any kind, really, the way that it makes people unipolar, that there's no longer, say, swing voters no longer exist, to put it mildly. And I mean, he was a highly religious man, and he believed in heaven and hell, and everyone thought, like, oh, he loves modern culture. He did not at all. He just, you know, like, get me to heaven, I'll be happy. Yeah.
Well, you seem to be extremely observant. You say you take a lot of notes, you know, when you're out in the world.
It all goes up here now, but...
It does? I thought you put them in a jar.
Nice, I did. I saved them all, thank God. And I look back at them, and the seeds of so many things I now do every day of my life, they're always present there. Here's the thing about ideas. If you stop looking for them, or if you stop being aware that they exist and can be found, the universe stops sending them to you. And so I always have to, you know, be looking for some kind of newness or a new way of thinking or being or creating.
But you're also looking at, what do people say? What are they eating? What are they doing? I mean, your descriptions were always like dead funny.
No, well, I can't be, I'm terrible at being funny on command.
Most people are.
Well, I have spent the last 35 years living in hotels, and after a while, hotels stopped doing room service because it was just not economically viable, and now you have Uber Eats. And, you know, last night at 1 in the morning, you had these dumplings that came in 10 minutes of me pushing a button. And that's everything. I can't believe how much cardboard I go through in a week from Amazon. I mean, I remember, like, every year the phone books came out, and anthropologists and garbologists, they could always tell what date landfill was by this one layer of telephone books. And now I feel like an eco-criminal, and yet there are these Amazon vans everywhere, and cardboard. It's like the age of cardboard.
It is the age of cardboard. Now, you gave up your visual art when you started writing. It was almost as if you felt you couldn't do both. And then you started making art again, you know, a while ago, and doing, you know, a lot of pop art, using barcodes, using Lego, using trash, using the world.
I remember around 1999 that it felt like I was completely ignoring like a whole lobe of my brain, sort of the visual cortex, color, planar, volumetric thinking. And the only way to really get back to that was through making things. And at the time, there were a lot of really exciting technologies, which now we take for granted, but, you know, scanning, memes, taking these things that are new in the world and what can be done with them. And
so it's like pop art in that way,
I mean,
see them differently.
I mean, I've had Andy Warhol and Marshall McLuhan are probably the two biggest, you know, influences in my life, and I'll be very open about that. And also in the 1990s, the world had not turned dark yet. It was possibly, we call it the last good decade, where, you know, communism was more or less over. There was no 9/11. Things were abundant, and there were very few boogeymen in the closet. And, you know, now it's so radically different. So it's nice to have had a decade of creativity where it was more meditative than political and necessary.
One of the major things you've worked on are public installations. You know, obviously you get pleasure from that. Are there any that stand out to you?
Well, public art is to studio art what nonfiction is to fiction. It's art that is somehow grounded in an external reality. The pieces that people love, there's one in Vancouver, the Digital Orca, which, I don't know, you do things, some things are hits, some aren't. There's the Terry Fox Monument also in Vancouver. There's the Golden Tree in Vancouver. Here in Toronto, at Fleet and Bathurst, there is the Monument to the War of 1812. People love that.
The two soldiers.
Yeah.
The toy soldiers.
The English one's standing up and the American one's toppled over. But to my credit, I had to work with military fetishists to get all the buttons and everything just period specific and accurate. So.
And lights on a Gordie Howe Bridge.
Okay. There's a Danish architect named Bjarke Ingels. He did a building in Calgary called Telesky, and he asked if I would do the lighting for it, and because he's a fan, I guess, and that was 9 years ago. It's finally in, and it looks great. So the Gordie Howe Bridge, which is linking Detroit to Windsor, it's a beautiful bridge. I mean, it really is. It's got about 5,000 really powerful LED lights. They're dimmable, they can be warm or cold, you can get them motion. So I want to have, so if you're 2 miles away looking at it, it looks like the bridge is like a living entity. And it's going to take a lot of nerds at the programming desk to do it, but I think it's going to be terrific.
Yeah, a wonderful link too between Canada and the US. How did COVID affect you?
COVID made me quite happy to stay at home and work. That was a very wonderful thing that came out of it. But what did happen, it put a lot of, especially younger people, into a permanent state of anxiety. And when I try to explain the anxiety, because I talk to my friends with kids, and it's, go back in your own life, my life, what was that movie that you shouldn't have seen that you saw anyway that really made you not sleep for like 2 weeks or so? And mine was Lord of the Flies and a few others. So to be a young person nowadays on 15 under, it's not just that 2 week window. Your entire life is spent in that like anxiety that can't be quelled or turned off. And so, you know, I've tried 2 nights ago, friends, they have a 13-year-old daughter, you know, okay, what is it you're freaking you out? And it was something she'd seen, someone showed her on a website, a picture of, I won't go into it. And that's all it took, and back to full-on anxiety. I can't find any historical incident of permanent anxiety that happens in a time of abundance. I mean, if you're in a concentration camp, you have every right to be anxious 24 hours a day, but if you're middle class living in North America, you know, you really don't have to be that anxious, but it's out there, and it's making them very different than you or I were at the same age.
Well, the world feels different, obviously does, even, you know, if you're older. And I'm thinking of, you know, your works now, the paintings, the new Ice Age. You say it's almost like there's sort of a hex on things. Even these beautiful icebergs that you're painting,
Yeah.
They're beautiful, but they're melting.
It's true. My father, who, when he went civilian, he also leased out float planes up and down the West Coast. And my younger brother and I, we'd always go up in these flights up to Alaska and the Yukon, and it was a wonderful thing. And so I got to see icebergs before a hex was put on them. And then I went to Munich and back during COVID and was flying over at Greenland for, I don't know, like the 50th, 60th time. And I looked at the icebergs and they weren't classic icebergs anymore. They had this spell, a hex put on them. And so I tried to capture that sense of haunted, or without being over. I mean, they're not melting or what have you, but something's going on. It's not right. Yeah.
And yet, you call yourself an optimist. Do you still feel that way?
I am. Okay, so here's something. I was at this dinner in New York, and December before COVID. And it's about 16 art world people. So these are well-educated, probably all liberal, and starting from about 15 right up to 85. And we're talking about the environment. And I said, well, you know, when I grew up, there was this thing called acid rain. And that kept me awake for quite a few weeks. And then you don't hear about it anymore because it was fixed. And then there's the ozone hole. That was the next thing that was going to make us all die. And I didn't sleep for weeks. And you don't hear about it anymore because it was fixed. And so this leads me to think that, you know, in my lifetime, having seen two things be fixed, that we can actually fix this. Oh my God, Valerie, the table just turned on me. Like, how dare you think that it's fixable? I'm like, what's going on here?
To remove the carbon.
Well, it's almost like hope is a thought crime at the moment. And that if you think that there's hope, then you won't be fierce enough in your fight against the enemy, whatever it is. And, you know, that was a shocker. But I do find a variation of that for young kids who are anxious. You can say that, and it does kind of bring them off the ledge a bit.
Since 2010, the University of British Columbia has been collecting your archives. And
Yeah.
you would call yourself what? A collector, a hoarder, a dumpster diver? You know, what would someone make of Douglas Coupland when they finally start sorting through this?
I remember from art school, and this is, if you don't want to go out dumpster diving, then I probably am not going to be able to be your friend much longer. Ideas are everywhere. They really are. And there are all kinds of hierarchies. Some information is more important, some's maybe more academic, what have you, but it is filterable. And here's something I really shouldn't say. Sometimes you just have to go for a month without looking at news. And then you go back to it and your brain feels a bit like Swiffered or something. You feel better. Yeah.
I think probably a very good idea. But your archives will be something deep and dense.
They're really good archives.
Are they?
Yeah. I put everything in them. And
what do you think is your greatest talent?
I think I'm really good at finding things that are so large as to be invisible.
Patterns?
Patterns. I think Gen X is a good example. Something, again, that is so in your face and so there that people don't even think to notice it. In the theoretical world, it's called a hyperobject. And that's a word for everyone to look up on Wikipedia. Is hyperobject. Also, the world really is a beautiful place at the end of the day. It is beautiful, and things that seem irksome now, you know, will become graceful, and just never lose that sense of finding beauty anywhere. So, yeah.
What does being Canadian mean to you?
Earlier, I was talking about this dinner party in Manhattan, December before COVID. At that same dinner party, an artist, Nick, he was longboarding down Madison Avenue, which is not something I recommend doing. He got hit by a taxi and he got an ambulance to some hospital. It's like 2.5 blocks away, and the ambulance was $1,200. And I'm like, what? And then the woman across the table says, like, oh my God, you got a deal. My ambulance cost $1,400. Now, wait, like, make sure, like, your taxi, your ambulance cost $1,200, yeah. Like, well, what would it have cost in Canada? Like $25 free? And they're like, well, you're a socialist. And that, I think we have this parallel universe up here, which in many ways, I think most ways, has a wonderful quality of life that is not so combative, that is more reflective. There was a period in the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s, when it felt like we were like this close to being absorbed by the United States, and it was pretty scary. And now we've individuated so far apart now that obviously we're a different culture, and I like that.
You feel we're very different from the Americans.
Yeah, and it didn't used to be like that. Yeah.
in ways that you can describe, or?
I think to a much larger extent, we're a nation of swing voters, that we don't self-polarize, and that if we're going to vote, show me what you got, show me what you've got. Okay, I'll make up my mind. It's not, my mind's made up already. Our minds haven't already been made up, and I think that's a really important thing in a democracy. Was that like too cheerleader?
No, that's really interesting.
Okay.
Yeah. Very interesting. Well, like everything coming out of your brain. Not necessarily what you'd expect, but super interesting anyway. Thank you, Douglas.
Thank you, Valerie. Pleasure to be here.
Pleasure to talk with you, and we'll be back again next week with Canada Files.
The preceding program was made possible through the generous support of Marshall McLuhan and family, as well as the following donors: Ted and Alice Kernahan, the Linwood Family Foundation, Jim and Sandy Triliving, the Browning Watt Foundation, Richard Pilasoff, Tony and Sherry Fell, Richard Wernham and Julia West, Mary Davey, Clinch House Foundation, Bryce and Nikki Douglas, the 63 Foundation, David and Cheryl Carr, the Sheila and David Wilson Foundation, and by the Central Canadian Public Television Association.